Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the ACC, Florida State, and Clemson, and how it's getting a little bit more dire for the ACC, and UNC might just be getting in on the party here pretty soon. But we'll check out that video if you want to see what all that's about. But let's talk about Dabo Swinney. Sports has incredible rivalries all across it. You know, you have the Yankees Red Sox, you have Ohio State Michigan, one of the best college football rivalries, but Dabo Swinney against the transfer portal is becoming one of the best in the game. It's a very heated rivalry where Dabo Swinney seems to just outright hate the portal. But he is back at it with some of the comments around the portal and defending his non-use of the portal, which has become an annual tradition. He has refused to use it to the degree that he absolutely can and frankly should. But here we are. We're back at Dabo Swinney having a number of excuses for why he did not use the portal, why it's not in his best interest to use the portal, but just to give you an idea of how unprecedented it is what Clemson is doing, the only three other schools that did not take a transfer this, off season was Army, Navy, and Air Force. And as you can imagine, there are a couple more hurdles for the kids transferring into those schools to get over to go to those schools. So it's not necessarily the group you want to be in. If you're talking about the college football space, definitely if you're talking from a Clemson Tiger fan perspective, definitely not the group you want to be in. But let's get into some of the comments that Dabo Swinney had on SiriusXM. He did an interview and they were talking about the portal and why he didn't attack more aggressively and why they didn't bring anyone in for what feels like the millionth time. And he had some very interesting comments that I want to get to here. And it starts with one that got circulation a little bit on Twitter the last couple of days, but he said, it's pretty simple. Most of the guys in the portal aren't good enough to play for us. That's just the reality of it. Here's the thing. That comment by itself is absolutely true. Most of the guys in the portal cannot play for Clemson. There are thousands of guys in the portal. At least 51% of those guys cannot play at Clemson for the Clemson Tigers. Plenty of them can. And I know that because Georgia picked up some, Alabama picked up some, Texas picked up some, Ohio State picked up some. These are all schools and all programs that are ahead of where Clemson is right this second. So that's not necessarily an argument to be made. I understand that technically he's right. Most of the players in the portal cannot play at Clemson, but plenty of them can, and you left a lot of meat on the bone. And he said it wasn't an intentional thing. He said he reached out to a couple of guys, but they've got to love you too, as he said. I don't think they attacked these guys to the aggression that he's trying to make it out to be. I'd be very surprised, in fact, if he was attacking these guys with that aggression, because when we talk about Dabo Swinney and the way that he kind of goes about business, this is the way he is. He doesn't want to use the portal, and if he's being, pushed into using the portal, he's going to use it in a way that is not going to get you players, very plainly. Like, if he's not fully in on the concept, he's not going to recruit these kids the same way he would recruit a kid that he really wants to get from high school. So it's one of those things that it's impossible to say, we are not going to be a part of the portal. We don't love being a part of the portal, but also we're going to, kick around some cans on a couple of guys and maybe we'll see if they want to come. But if they don't love us, they're going somewhere else and that's whatever. You have to compromise at some point. You have to find the middle ground. You have to not only, reach out to these guys, but actually give them competitive offers around the country and actually be aggressive. And look, Clemson's roster is awesome. There's no two ways about that. It is one of the best rosters up and down. It has one of the best coaching staffs in the country. There are a lot of incredible things about Clemson. I don't want to act like everything, like the sky is falling over there. It's not necessarily. But with some of the guys they lost a starter at wide receiver in Bo Collins. They lost DBs in Toriano Pride Jr. and Andrew Makuba in the back end. You've lost tons of people, and 18 different FBS teams have brought in 20 transfers this offseason. And now I've said before, I think, the number is probably somewhere between those two extremes, where you want to use it as a supplemental tool more than you want to use it to create your team. And from that point of view, I enjoy that, Clemson wants to build this team that way, but they're making the same mistake over and over again. They keep telling themselves that the team that they have in front of them, which is a fantastic team that is as talented as most of them in the country, is good enough to win a title, and it's just not. Very plainly, I like the Clemson team. They are a very, very good team, and I guess if they can absolutely thread a needle, they can find their way into the playoff and then make a run. But from where I'm standing right now, the team that was there that last year and the team that was there this year did not upgrade. They did not get better, at least from a 50,000 feet perspective. Now, we won't really know what that looks like until fall. Maybe there are some players that I'm, not aware of right now that are definitely going to be big time players for them. But from where I'm standing, there were at least double-digit players that Clemson could have been very much in on, especially on the back end of that defense, especially at the wide receiver position, that they just decided to not get in on. And it's Dabo Swinney just kind of slowly burying himself in this new era of college football. And I don't want this to take away from who Dabo Swinney is and what he is doing, because what he did and what he's, continued to do for Clemson and for college football is insane. What he was able to pull off during the height of the Alabama powers is remarkable. No one even dreamed that you'd be able to win 2 titles during that reign, and he was able to do it and in pretty quick succession. And you can say what you want. You can say that it was Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson that carried him to those titles. You can say, he's nothing without his coordinators. All that aside, he was able to pull off something that was really incredible. And he did it the way that he wanted to do it, which was something that is really cool and something that, frankly, I wish was the case in college football. I wish there was a world where it was only high school kids coming in and you were able to develop these kids and get relationships with these kids and send them off after 3, 4, 5 years and they don't leave one time. But we live in the real world. We live in college football today where the transfer portal is a real entity that if you're not using it, you're cutting yourself off of the ankles. So Clemson is doing the thing that Clemson does. Dabo is doing the thing that Dabo does. But one of the quotes that frankly just made me laugh more than anything else, but definitely something that Dabo, it's a very Dabo quote, I guess is the best way to put it. He said, honestly, every player is technically a transfer. We just signed the whole class who will transfer from high school. We like our guys. We like our starters. So that one's just kind of a little bit of a corny Dabo quote that we always get from time to time. And first of all, he's wrong. Let's just put that out there. They are not transfers. But at the end of the day, the quote at the end is the one that I really want to focus on, where he says, we like our guys. We like our starters. He's right. I appreciate the sentiment. It is lovely that he approaches his team not only as, football players, not only as athletes, but as kids, he loves. And he treats them as, his other sons. And he's a very lovely guy to his team, it seems. The reality is, tough decisions need to be made. This is a business. This is, you're trying to win national titles. You're not trying to make everyone like you. And that's, the harsh truth of college football, where if you're going to be the best, you're going to ruffle some feathers. It happened with Nick Saban when he was making his rise. There were plenty of people that were not too happy about the way he was going about business, but that was the way of the world. And now, even more so, that is the way of the world. You have to be aggressive. You have to compromise from time to time, and I don't want to necessarily say that he needs to become a full transfer portal team, go full Florida State or Colorado route where you're bringing in tons of guys every cycle by any means, but not using it is just coaching malpractice at this point. And he knows more about football than I do. He knows, infinitely more about the system than I do and what he wants to do at his program. And I don't want to act like I know better than Dabo Swinney, but I can tell you that the teams that have been the most successful over the last couple of years when the transfer portal has become a big part of the game is the teams that blend the two together. And that can be done. There is a world where you have these great relationships with each other and you have, kids that really respond to you and you have kids that you develop from high school, but also you bring in some kids. You transfer in some kids that need a new place to play, and it doesn't necessarily take away from your culture. I know he's trying to protect that Clemson culture that he's built over the last couple of years, but as college football changes, your culture just has to change. And it doesn't have to change, entirely. He doesn't have to do an entire rebuild by any means, because overall it's a very solid culture over there at Clemson. But when you look at what he is today and what they were 8 years ago, it's two entirely different entities. No one is really, I don't want to say no one's scared of Clemson, because they are still one of the best teams in the ACC. They are still one of the teams that absolutely can compete for a championship, and if they win the ACC, then I'll be eating my words. But the way I look at it right now, it is Clemson at an absolute standstill, trying their best to do it their way, and then all of these cars just lapping them around the track over and over. You have Florida State just winning the ACC and then building off that, getting a remarkable transfer portal class. You have Miami finally heating up under Mario Cristobal. You have tons of other schools that are using the transfer portal in ways that you're not. And that's going to close the gap. That's just the way of college football. It's going to close the talent gap. It's going to close the ability gap. And it's going to close the gap between you and everyone else, if it hasn't been closed already. So Clemson is in a position where a lot of things are changing. Realignment is coming. Florida State is coming. They are fully here at this point. Miami is a team that is on the rise, among others. You have to be ready for this. You have to be ready for possible realignment where you go into the SEC, and if they go into the SEC with this attitude, they're going to get torn to pieces. I'm just being totally honest. It doesn't matter how good that program is. It doesn't matter how incredible some of the players coming in from high school are. They're not going to be ready to play in the SEC right away. And if you're not using the transfer portal to supplement this roster somehow, you're going to get buried. So I wish that Dabo Swinney's way was the right way. I wish that recruiting kids from high school and building them through 3 years, 4 years, and developing those relationships and building a championship roster was the way that you could do things. But you can't. You just can't. In the NIL and transfer portal, it is not a feasible way to go about business unless you are going to bring in the best roster you could possibly imagine, the best coaches you could possibly imagine, and develop these kids immediately. And that's impossible. So Clemson is in a position where they're going to have to make a decision at some point here soon, whether it's forcing Dabo Swinney to use an entity he doesn't want to use, whether it's, starting to think about moving on from Dabo Swinney. I don't know, but he definitely has a ton of leash, and this year could be more than fine, and maybe I'm eating my words, and if I am, then I will be sitting here in December more than happy to say that I was wrong about this team. But way I'm looking at it right now, they are not my ACC title champion. They are not the team that I think is going to be in a playoff. They are not a team, especially going forward, that I'd be super worried about in the grand scheme of college football. And that's because of a decision that Dabo Swinney could have very easily not made. But he's made his decision. He's made his bed. He's got to lay in it. And it could spell the end of whatever, this Clemson run has been. But at the end of the day, we'll see what happens. Obviously, a lot of this is up in the air. And maybe Dabo Swinney pulls a rabbit out of his hat. But I'd be very surprised. But we're going to take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the top 100 players in college football. On3 dropped their list for that, and I really want to break down the top 10, which quarterbacks made the list, and which teams just absolutely dominated this list. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.